Hi and welcome. I have a special guest today, Gary Direnfeld. He's a social worker, and if you have children and you're going through a separation or divorce, you're going to want to watch this. Hi, welcome back. My name is Bev Lewis, and I am the president and founder of Positive Solutions Divorce Services. And I'm excited today to have a very special guest with me, Gary Direnfeld. And Gary is a social worker and has more than 35 years of experience with children and families. And we are going to have a chat today about how separation and divorce affect children. So welcome, Gary. It's a very wonderful pleasure to have you join me today.
Bev, thanks for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, absolutely. So my number one question, and I'm sure our viewers all have the same question, is how does the process of separation and a divorce affect children?
Great question.
And not just little children, but mid-aged children, preteens, teenagers.
Adult children.
Adult children, absolutely.
Right? Often a forgotten segment of folks going through the parental divorce.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, when we look at the effects of divorce on children, first of all, we tend to talk about children as if it's this one uniform group. And it isn't. I mean, we have babies, we have toddlers, we have preschoolers, we have school age, we have preteens, tweens, teens, and young adults and older adults.
Right.
So we want to look at the effects of divorce on children through what we call a developmental lens.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
However, having said that, common to all impacts of divorce on kids is disruption. Mm-hmm. That's number one, just disruption. So how does disruption affect anyone? The other issue affecting children of divorce is as their parents are distracted, reasonably distracted, they're going to be emotionally disheveled. Oh my goodness, where are we going to live? How are we going to do this? How are we going to sort things out? How are we going to maintain two households? Parents are less available.
Yes.
They're just less available while the child is dealing with disruption. Mm-hmm. So in the infant, disruption can equal challenges of feeding, challenges of sleeping. We can see more runny, poopy diapers. We'll see diaper rash in the child. And we'll say, is this parent parenting effectively? And they may be parenting effectively, but this is the effects of disruption.
And stress.
That's right. The disruption is the stress.
Right.
In that toddler, you're getting ready to toilet train. But now the child is distracted. They're feeling the tension in the home. And so if they've achieved toilet training, they may, because of their distraction, because of their distress, not be able to concentrate on the tasks of toilet training. Say, oh, my child has regressed. Your child hasn't regressed. They're stressed out too. Yes. This will return.
Yes.
Rarely do we see a kid going to college in diapers, right? That too shall pass.
Yes.
And the school-age kid, these are the ones who will have difficulty concentrating. Mm-hmm. They're staring blankly out the window. They're fidgety in their seats. Now, in the past, we would have labeled these kids attention deficit disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. A good colleague of mine, Paul Ricketts, he calls ADD attention divided by divorce.
Oh,
it's brilliant.
Absolutely.
Now, in our preteen, teen-age kids, how it affects them, they too feel the disruption, the lack of parental, in a sense, availability. These are the ones who, in their despondency or anger or angst, may turn to their friends. They may turn to drugs or alcohol at this stage. They may turn to delinquent kind of behavior. They may become perfectionists. They may become hyper involved in their school activities. Say, oh, my kid isn't affected. They're straight A's. So wait a minute. They may be indulging in those activities to avoid what's going on in the family. So that straight A is the result of anxiety, not the result of, just wanting to perform well. So depending on the age of our child, it affects them differently. The issue is disruption and lack of parental availability.
So when you refer to disruption as the topic, is disruption a cause of conflict, or is the conflict and the disruption two separate entities?
Two separate entities.
Okay.
And, you know, and I'm glad you raised the issue of conflict. Many parents will fight over the parenting time between them, the decision-making authority, what school the child is going to go to, what faith they're going to practice. When we look at the outcome of children of separated parents and we say, how come some kids do well? How come some kids don't do well? The issue isn't any of those factors. The issue is fighting over those factors.
Yes.
So the degree to which we are engaged in conflict, that conflict falls on the heads of our little ones, distresses them as well. They're living in a war zone. They may feel an urge to pick sides. They may wonder if they are the source of the parental conflict, given you're fighting about us, does that make me responsible for this conflict?
Right.
And it is these factors that create disruption, disturbance for the child, such that the child may come to feel anxiety, depression, a need to resolve things on behalf of their parents, which whole other mess because they're little ones.
Yes.
They can't take responsibility for the parental issues.
Yes.
So yeah, conflict is the single biggest predictor of outcome for children of separated parents. So if you want your kids to do well, really sit back and think hard, do I need to fight about this? And what will be worse for the child? The decision that's made that they go to this school versus that school, or the fight over it? And typically it's the fight.
Is that right? Yeah. Yeah. So what would you recommend for parents that are going through separation that they have? I'm going to talk right now about the younger children. So kids that are still going to daycare, that age group. What would you recommend for settling conflict in the home? Parents are still living in the same home. They have not physically separated.
Yeah.
They're in the process of separating. What would you recommend in that case to be able to save the child from so much conflict? And I wanted to focus more on the younger children at this
Sure.
this stage.
Sure.
I'll ask other questions about the older kids, but because and from what I understand from my research, really the developmental stages of the child really happen between birth and age 5, and so that's why I wanted to focus on this age. So they're developing their little brains and their personalities with parents who have been loving, they've been caring for this child, and then all of a sudden something happens and there's a huge amount of conflict. They're still living in the same home. What would you recommend to the parents of a situation
Sure.
like that?
Sure.
Leave the home, stay in the home and try and work things out, get counseling, go to mediation, go to lawyers. What is it that you would recommend for that little child?
So first, I have to talk about a myth.
Okay.
The myth is that prior to, hey, I want a divorce, we were caring, loving parents. You might have been caring, loving parents. The myth is that things were well prior to, hey, I want a divorce. Hell no. I want a divorce because for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years prior to triggering the event, things were not well. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so when you're looking at a preschooler, that 2 to 4 year old, 5-year-old, they're already living in tension. This is what they're growing up in. Once one parent says, hey, I want a separation or divorce, then both parents are now concerned about how do I maintain a relationship with my child when I'm not don't have access to my child 24/7.
Yes.
And so this is the mess that the child is growing up in, and they are in their little lives it's almost as if the entirety of their lives have been immersed in conflict. So if they hear the bickering to shouting, screaming, yelling, or the Cold War, where we don't talk to each other, that is still a home filled with tension.
Yes.
So these are kids who pick up on that. Their brain is now being wired to observe and look out for tension. So they develop these antennae, and they're forever scanning the environment. And in scanning their environment, they're trying to determine, is it safe? Rather than feeling at home. Because when I feel at home, I can now concentrate on the tasks of being that child.
Yes.
If I'm scanning the environment, always first having to determine, is it safe? And if I don't think it's safe, what's my next move? I can't concentrate on the tasks of being that child. So these kids are at risk of having their brains wired to always look for danger, which takes them away from just living. Yeah. Now, you know, I want parents, you say, well, what should parents do? Let's say you and I have to go through a door, and we out-polite each other. No, you go first. No, you go first. No, you, right? And then we say, fine, and without even thinking we both go at the same time, we crash.
Yeah.
Not too good. Or, no, I'm going to go first. No, I'm going to go first. And now we're in a fisticuffs to get through that door. This is what happens to parents in dispute at this moment of crisis looking to separate. They need to be mindful of that and say, look, despite how I feel, I'm happy to let you go first. I'm happy to let you, right? It's not a race.
Right. Right.
So we have to relax into the conflict and realize that we have to manage our own behavior, not the behavior of the other parent.
Right.
Every time they go after managing the behavior of the other parent, they've lost. It's when you manage your own that you can actually move forward. So I will hold myself back from rushing through that door. That allows you to go. All of a sudden, we're no longer crashing.
Right, right.
If we're going to co-reside during the separation process, it is helpful to set some ground rules. Who's going to make decisions when, so that we're not crashing through that door together? Who's going to pick up the kids when? And I tell parents, what was your natural rhythm before triggering the event? The degree to which you may be able to follow that natural rhythm still might be helpful. I encourage parents to meet with a parenting expert, a mediator, and if you rush off to court, you will escalate the conflict. You will.
Yes.
It's built in structurally.
Yes.
Court is a prosecutorial process, and in that process, people perceive themselves as winning when they prove the other the scoundrel.
Yes.
Who amongst us wants to be proven the scoundrel? And so in order to defend myself, I may have to prove you the bigger scoundrel.
Correct.
This becomes a race to the bottom.
Yeah.
In mediation, we're not out to prove anyone a scoundrel. We're out to say, okay, things haven't worked, but what needs to change? What do we need to do differently in order to move forward? So you might have been a scoundrel. I might have been a scoundrel. We're going to lay that aside. What are our concerns? What are our interests? How do we want our children to grow versus proving each other a scoundrel? How do we want our children to grow? And what are the structures we need to put in place in order to facilitate those interests?
Right on.
Such a different process.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. And when I work with clients in mediation, I often say to them, because there are times that emotions will run high, and one party will say, well, this isn't working for me, so I'll see you in court. And I really have them sit back and think, do you have any idea what this is going to do, not only to you as a person,
naivety.
What it's going to do to your spouse, your relationship, because you're going to have to co-parent these kids going forward. What it's going to do to your relationship, it's going to make it even worse. And what it's going to do to your children. Ultimately, it's the children that are most affected. The parents will eventually get over the relationship with the other spouse. They'll move on with another relationship, and what's left are the children of that relationship that they have to rebuild. and it's very difficult. So definitely the mediation process is
Huge
very
difference. We want to leave our children feeling intact. If we go through that race to the bottom, and by the way, we all exude our feelings. We all exude our emotions. I don't care who you are. And our children pick up on that. I don't have to tell my child, hey, the other parent is a scoundrel, for the child to know that's how I feel about that parent. And going to court reinforces that. You know, talking on the phone about that with my lawyer, my new partner, a parent, a family member, a friend, the children are overhearing this.
Yes.
And as our children overhear or are exposed to our animosity, kids look up. They say, I'm half of this parent, I'm half of that parent. So if that parent's bad and I'm half of it, so half of me is bad.
Correct, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And if, you know, they're exposed to similar in the other parent, then, okay, so that parent's bad. Oh, that parent's bad. I'm half of them each. I'm 100% bad. Well, you know, we keep talking about self-esteem and self-concept. Do we really want to create a structure where we decimate our kids' self-esteem? Yet inadvertently, and no parent wants to do this, but inadvertently it's built into the conflict, into the structure, particularly when going to court.
Right.
Mediation can be terrifying, though. Oh my gosh, I have to be in the same room. Well, hello, you got to be in the same courtroom as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So now that you're going to be in each other's company, how do you want your time used?
Yeah.
Proving the scoundrel or determining a better outcome?
Right on. Yeah. And I just want to mention something too, because I do, in my mediation practice, I do see quite a few parents who, and I'm going to move now to the next age group, but
Sure.
quite a few parents that are talking to their kids about their separation. So they're confiding in them about, oh yeah, so this is what we've decided to do, or, you know, dad did this, or mom did this, or this is what happened in mediation, or this is what happened in court, and, you know, they're confiding in them to, one, I think, have that friendship with their kids, and two, to get them on their side, right? I want you to believe that I'm the better parent so that you will come with me and not go with your father or not go with your mother. So there's a lot of that, and it's very difficult to talk to parents about, these need to be two separate entities. This is a grown-up issue that you need to deal with your spouse, and leave your children to be children. So can you talk on that just for a brief time?
We talk about setting boundaries, and here's why it is important to protect our kids from our feelings in this process. The degree to which I use my child as my confidant, or I share with my child things that are going on about the separation and divorce, it puts the child in the position of feeling they have to caretake or parent me. We actually have a name for that. It's called the parentified child. Google that, parentified child. You will see in there a number of terrible outcomes for children who have played that role. Chief among those outcomes are actually mental health problems, mental illness. And chief amongst those mental health outcomes are depression and anxiety. Here's why. I tell you, oh, I'm feeling miserable, and oh, you know, the other parent is a scoundrel, and you know, I hope this is what, and the child feels, I got to help this parent. The child's the child. Whatever they do to try and help me, they feel a sense of responsibility, but have no authority, and I'm not likely to follow their advice. Okay?
Yeah.
So then the child has to internalize, oh my goodness, will my parent follow the advice? Are they going to do better? That's anxiety. Alternately, oh my gosh, they didn't follow my advice, and things are getting worse, and I'm feeling overwhelmed. That's depression. And as that continues, and it's the child's experience of failing at helping these parents as the parentified child, they become a disaster. And when that occurs, time after time after time, our brain wires to that. So I internalize depression. I internalize anxiety. Come adolescence, these are the kids that we really worry about. Eating disorders, cutting, suicidal ideation, suicidal behavior, promiscuity, drugs and alcohol. This, using the child as a confidant, we want parents to understand early in the game, it's dangerous for your child's well-being. Parents, rather than turning the child into a confidant, leave them the heck out of this. Do get counseling for yourself.
Yes.
You know, people come to see me, you know, a separation coach. It's a fabulous service. It's where the parent can go, blow off some steam, but also learn much of what we're talking about and how to manage yourself more effectively in that process so that you can actually manage what's coming at you from the other parent and support your children in a healthy way.
Right on. Right on. So, number one piece of advice that you would give to parents of any age child that's going through separation or divorce?
Knowing that disruption, conflict, lack of parental availability are key issues to how the child is going to come out of this, we want to minimize the disruption. So now that we know that, so how do we minimize the disruption? How do we quickly or as efficiently as possible set new structures in place so that if we are going to disrupt, we go from something to something else that is somewhat predictable? How are we going to minimize the conflict? So we're going to look at choosing strategies for resolving our differences that are more geared towards peacemaking. So it could be mediation, it could be collaborative family law, I haven't spoken about that. It could be counseling. And we're going to mind our boundaries.
Yeah.
So when we do these things, we're certainly going to have a better outcome for our kids, and that's what we all want as
And that's
parents.
what we all want, because they are our future, and we need our future to be stable.
Yeah. We're playing to the long game in that, by the way. The long game is our children grow up as well and healthy as possible, and we're able to maintain a lifelong relationship with them.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Well, thank you, Gary. This has been extremely insightful, and anybody that is dealing with a separation from their spouse and they have children, please take some of the information that Gary has shared with us today and really try and find some resources, one, if you need them, and really think about what your role and your partner's role is in the developmental issues of your child as you're going through this difficult time. So thank you, Gary. I really appreciate you spending your time with us and
Thanks for inviting me.
sharing this information. Thank you.